Whether we admit it or not, our society selectively chooses what it appropriates from others and what it assimilates to. Um, the rest of it becomes a battle cry for an injustice done to that particular group. And I want to illustrate that whole conversation. So we're talking about um, the idea of appropriation, and this will draw a connection to the arts as I go on. When I look at society, I hear what people say. I take that in, and I also take in very practical observation. On one hand, we have um, we have people that are drawn to certain things because of how it makes them feel. It's not even about reality or truth. It's about feeling. And I think in that way, the arts connects to to human emotion. And I think a lot of times that's why certain subject matters are a part of the arts, not necessarily because of the truth of them, but because of narratives that we cling to, that we decide are our our own truths, and that's a word that people tend to use um, sometimes when they're afraid of the objective truth. You know, my truth, your truth, and we validate whatever we can come up with, and that that can be dangerous. That can be, not so much dangerous, but it is a fact. We have so much division in this country while benefiting from one another that we spend a lot of time trying to one up the other person, or in certain instances, create villains where villains didn't exist. Whether we're talking racially or whether we're talking gender wise, we create adversaries so that we can feel more relevant. Because who else is more relevant than the hero, the protagonist of a certain story or narrative? With my art, I do explore that from time to time, and a series of works that I'm doing explore the convenience and the feeling of oppression of assimilation. And I always like exploring ideas from a different perspective, and I don't think that that's going to change about me. But I've never been able to look at something. It's been a long time since I have. I won't say that I never have, but it's been a long time since I was a part of the group think. And I watch my circles become smaller and smaller because most human beings have some degree of groupthink. Most human beings want to identify with a larger idea, an idea that's bigger than themselves. However true or preposterous um, those ideas may be. Well, I look at it when I tackle those subjects of identity, the times that I do, from a perspective that's very individual, and people may not even understand what I'm talking about when I approach in that way. But to be honest, I don't know everyone, so I can't speak on behalf of everyone, but I can have an individual response that is a part of that conversation. And recently, the work that I've been creating, it asks a very specific question. And that question is the idea of assimilation. Do we embrace it as it's convenient, or do we run from it when not so much so? And does it make, one stance on that right or wrong? The conveniences that we enjoy from one another are a direct result sometimes of people that we ostracize, people that we vilify, um, genders that we vilify. And this is the kind of exploration that I want to do. Um, I think it's simplified, and I think it's simplistic to say white patriarchy bad or black patriarchy uh, bad or matriarchy bad and leave it at that. But I find that a lot of art does that. I find that a lot of art is not explorative in how it dissects a certain topic, and that's a critique that I have, and it's not a critique that everybody has to share, but critique and criticism that I have. Um, and I believe sometimes art has become such a reflection of society because most people today are simplified. I do not believe that we are as deep thinkers or we produce as a deep thinking people as we have in the past. Um, and just from interactions with some of our younger people, it seems as though their emotions are simply reactions or um, pre-programmed responses that don't have the same kind of depth. I won't say the same level of depth because I don't live within them, but they don't have the same kind of depth. I watch us as we conveniently protest things, we conveniently take stances on things while benefiting from other things that may be in complete contradiction and complete opposition to the very thing that they said they were protesting. So on one hand, you have this outcry of support for something, but at the same time, you have people supporting things that make their lives easier that are in complete opposition of of what stance they were taking on that one thing, two things that they were so passionate about as far as whether it's rights or equality or freedom. We don't like being uncomfortable. And I think we see the reflection of that in art as well. I do not believe that the art community likes to be uncomfortable. Well, I make people uncomfortable sometimes, and it's not for the sake of, I'm not a shock jock, but I do like um, talking about things that we neglect and we look the other way. I don't like letting people look the other way as an artist, and that's just a personal quirk of mine. I don't like letting people off the hook. And I've heard conversations of of uh, colonizing, of like I said, appropriating. But then I watch society, and I'll give you a very stark example of that. Um, on one hand, we completely dismantle the patriarchy, and then we'll ask why elements of the patriarchy have receded and don't seem to exist like they do. You destroy masculinity or femininity, and then you wonder where some of those traits are because they're no longer benefiting you. Um, you ask for an outcome and you get it, and you wonder why there's now pain associated with it. And there's another side of that too. We proclaim outrage against things, but we really don't move to remedy certain things. I've seen racial exchanges where people are will say that black people, if you don't like it, go back to Africa, or black people will say the reason that we have all these problems is because of white people, and then when white people recede from the table, it's the narrative changes. The narrative changes to um, as an oppressed people, we've been banned. We're being abandoned. And I don't think people understand the double talk that they give. So, having many perspectives on this, I began creating um, a new body of work that touches on it. And the idea of assimilating within a culture, um, and I did explore race because race seems to be becoming more of a hotbed. But I would like to have a different conversation about that. That's not the only thing I want to talk about, but I do want to have a different conversation about that. Is even in Black society, we pick and choose. We pick and choose. Sometimes we long to be consumed by assimilation, and sometimes we are repelled by it. And my question in my new work is it possible to have it both ways? And are we overthinking it? Is convenient assimilation simply the classic state of being alive and having preference? Do we put more on it by putting a racial or um, gender related connotation to certain things? We care more about who built what than what was actually built. We care more about who made something available or brought it into reality than we do that it's in reality. I personally don't necessarily care whether a white person or a black person or a Latina or Latino person created something. I'm very thankful that certain things are just there. And I think we have a fear of being absorbed by one another because of a loss of that identity. But there are certain groups that never had an identity of their own to really lose. If you read the history of certain people, um, there's cultures that are adopted as a particular um, cornerstone, as a particular identifying element that didn't even originate from that community. But because of a lack of research and understanding, there's fear. And I do hear the loss of, the conversation about the loss of Black identity, Black culture, things like that. But 90% of the people have never researched the origins of that culture. And the preeminent fear of, um, of becoming Eurocentricized without context takes priority over truly figuring out who you are and who you aren't, and the origin story of who you are. And I won't get into that. There's several writings. There's several levels of um, of research that I've had to do because even with the great minds, I absolutely have to fact check. I will not take a a a professor's words. I have to look at your footnotes. I have to look at your sources. I have to research the sources. And this is what the average American is not going to do. But the less you're informed, the chances to become angrier you now expose yourself to. So my my work is exploring the loss of identity, the fear of appropriate being not being appropriated, but the fear of being assimilated. And is there a need for fear, or is fear the driving force to continuing to um, cling on to my own individuality? I ask a secondary question. If I am clinging to my individuality and I'm clinging to my identity, is it benefiting me? Is it helping me? Is my identity truly my identity? And I may leave some information below that has links that are less cryptic than what I'm talking about because I don't believe that many of our ears are ready to hear um, what I'm going to say. What I want to say is not necessarily rooted in emotional. Um, it's not overly rooted in emotional content. It's rooted in surgical steel objective truth, which doesn't always bring comfort. But I think our individuality can be a good thing and can be a horrendous thing. Human beings connect off of um, similar traits. First, we connect visually, then we connect off of culture, we connect off of those shared principles, um, a shared sense of identity. And the more we continue to individualize ourselves, we do have to deal with the ramifications. If you are no longer human in your or your version of human is no longer human in the way that I understand human, then I can't it's very difficult. I won't say that you can't, but it's very difficult for another person to show genuine empathy towards you because you spend an enormous amount of time trying to tell others how different you are than them. And if we look at the circumstances in which we've we've come together, and even some of the great pieces of art that talk about unity, that show unity, they show a kinsmanship between individuals or people that are part of a part of that divide. Whether we're talking about great movements of equality, whether we're talking about the great movements of as far as gender equality, there has to be a common ground that we agree upon. Thus, some form of um, emotional connection, some form of um, cultural identification has to take place. And sometimes that's viewed as assimilation. When you get on the same page as a person, um, it becomes threatening, especially if you have to take that first step forward. And in that way, when you take this first step forward, in your sometimes in your inner mind, you think, I've had to become like them in order for this outcome, and that's wrong. And we get so process driven that we don't really value the outcome or the actual objective of what we're trying to achieve. And I may start doing a more in-depth podcast that is more pinpoint, more um I'm an open person, but I want to say open in a more visceral way because I don't think that I can hit all points above ground without sparking something that I don't want to spark, which is outrage. I like dialogue, I like conversation, but I absolutely detest outrage. So I think I probably have to prep that particular conversation that I'm wanting to have. Anyway, this is your guy, the brave artist, talking about talking about the idea of of a fear of being absorbed, a fear of loss of identity, a fear of, and also the possibilities of looking at certain things through a different lens, and the possibilities of getting outside of the box and not necessarily having a different opinion because some things are true, but having a different vantage point. I would love to know what you think. I've enjoyed watching the channel grow these past few days from double digits to triple digits, and that makes me happy to know that there are people that are willing to think and have these conversations that are not always mainstream. Until the next time, take care.